who is Solomon within Islam? This is the Star of David, okay? Many people also don't know that it goes by another name and historically has been known as the Seal of Solomon. So it's not just the Star of David, it's the Seal of Solomon. This symbol can be found all throughout modern day Turkey today in almost every mosque and in a lot of the government buildings as well. All these other Islamic nations have removed this seal by and large from all of their mosques and all throughout their culture because of strained relations with Israel and because Israel uses that symbol so adamantly across the board. But here's what I believe Trump is doing, whether he knows it or not. This could be really good for Israel. If the United States is friends with them, then maybe that's going to set Israel up in the future to have more peace, because now we have a motivation to keep the peace, right? Here's the problem though. This is the Star of David, okay? Many people know of it today as a symbol of Israel. It's on the Israeli flag. We see it all over Israeli architecture, all over Israeli products that are sold around the world. But many people also don't know that it goes by another name and historically has been known as the Seal of Solomon. So it's not just the Star of David, it's the Seal of Solomon. Where do y'all think this picture was taken? You see the star right there?
Yeah, no, that's going to be, it looks like a temple. It's because the guy on the bottom left there with the red hat, that is oh, dang, I can't remember the name. This is the one I always forget the name of, but it's some temple, like a secret society kind of temple, but like a Middle Eastern one. Is that?
This picture was taken in Turkey. So this symbol can be found all throughout modern day Turkey today in almost every mosque, every modern mosque, and in a lot of the government buildings as well. And so people going to Turkey, even though it is Islamic in a lot of ways, would say, okay, well, why is the Star of David hanging on the wall in Turkey? And, why are we, quote unquote, supporting Israel through showing the Star of David? And the truth is, to them, it's not the Star of David, it's the Seal of Solomon. So here is Solomon in Islamic tradition. This is King Solomon in the middle. So Solomon is not just a biblical character in the Jewish text and traditional Judaism and in Christianity, obviously now, but he is also a character that shows up in the Quran. And there's a lot of stories about Solomon in the Quran that don't show up in the Christian Bible or in the Torah or any of the other Jewish texts. So this is really interesting.
It's also Solomon is very important in Freemasonry too.
Right. So that symbol there and this symbol here is not just used in Judaism and also traditionally in Islam, but it's also used in the occult as well. So there's that. And so, there's a lot of connections there. And they would probably refer to it as the Seal of Solomon before they referred to it as the Star of David.
Yeah.
A lot of the other Islamic nations used to actually use this seal a lot because of their connections way, way, way back to the story of Abraham. From Abraham, you had Isaac, you had Ishmael, and eventually leading to these two different people groups, the Israelis, and then, obviously we got the Israeli-Palestine conflict, but then you have all of these different Muslims in all these different countries that would associate themselves with Abraham, but through a different line, right? Or through a different religion. So all these other Islamic nations have removed this seal by and large from all of their mosques and all throughout their culture because of strained relations with Israel and because Israel uses that symbol so adamantly across the board. So who is Solomon within Islam? Solomon is considered by the Sufis, which is a branch of Islam, which is more mystic in nature. So they're mystic Muslims, essentially. He's considered to be one of the greatest mystics who ever lived. So when you read the Quran, you see that Solomon actually had mystical powers, the ability to control the wind. He had the ability to do certain things. He had special objects that allowed him to do certain things. And so obviously I don't believe that because I'm a Christian, but if you read the Quran, and that's what they traditionally believe, and the Sufis took this and they ran with it, right? And so one of the things he did was he was able to essentially wage war against demonic forces in this story, in the Quran, and he subjugated the demons and he used them as servants or slaves to build monuments and to build structures. So Solomon was a builder. Historically speaking, Solomon was the richest man in his time, and a lot of people believe still he's the richest man of all time if you look at inflation and all that kind of stuff for the amount of resources he had. Also, he's traditionally known as one of the wisest men who ever lived, both in Judaic literature, but also in Islamic literature as well. So the Sufis used the Seal of Solomon more often because they were more mystic, and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, that bleeds over into the occult. But the weird thing is the Sufis have been rejected by and large and persecuted by other Muslims. So, but here's the thing that the Sufis believe that the rest of the Islamic world has kind of gotten away from. They believe in asceticism, which is the abstinence from worldly pleasures in order to grow more spiritual and to have a greater connection to God or to the spiritual world. And so, and they point back to Solomon as being kind of like the originator of that. So they believe in abstinence. They believe in things like, okay, greed is bad. Fame is bad. We've got to stay away from these things because they will corrupt your soul. They'll hurt you. And we want to be more spiritual and we want to please God, right? Like that's kind of their belief. And the rest of Islam has kind of gotten away from that in a lot of ways. Yeah. So here's what's crazy about it. Solomon in history really was a builder, and he was known for the things that he built, right? And they believe that he had all these mystical powers he was able to build using these demons and stuff. But they also use, and this is taught all through Islam, is the story of Solomon defeating these demons and subjugating them is kind of taught as a metaphor, the same way we use Jesus, Jesus's parables sometimes as a metaphor for, okay, now what does this mean practically for me? What they'll use it for is they'll use it as a metaphor for learning to dominate our own demonic desires. So the evil desires within and things that would come from demonic influence, dominating that and learning to live in a way, that's far away from greed, far away from self-promotion, seeking worldly fame, those kind of things, the destructive desires, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yet, at the same time, where has Islam gone? So that's what traditionally Islam believes, right? Greed is bad, and they point back to Solomon, in a lot of ways. But Islam, in a lot of ways, has gotten away from that. And what we see in Saudi Arabia, if you go research like the royal family and what, especially a lot of the people, and so I believe Ryan hit the nail on the head, Reese hit the nail on the head here. Ryan said the government uses Islam as a tool. They're not practicing, the leaders are not practicing real Islam. Reese said the carrot is more important than the stick, right? How can we motivate these people with something that really motivates them more than, what you would think would motivate them? And so throughout history, Solomon's rule has inspired several Islamic leaders. So they look back to Solomon as this inspiration. Why? It's not because of the asceticism. It's not because of his devotion to God. It's because of his ability to build wealth and to grow famous. This is what I believe is happening. The corruption's widespread in Saudi Arabia. It's systemic and it's endemic. And the lines between the state assets and personal wealth has just completely gone. Like anything that the government's is mine if I'm in the royal family. In 2001, there was an interview with Prince Bandar bin Sultan, a senior member of the royal family. And it's supposed to be, the Quran is the official constitution, is one way you could look at it, of the country of Saudi Arabia, right? So they're supposed to be following the Quran to the letter. Obviously, it's open to interpretation. They're not really doing that. But he acknowledged in this interview, acknowledged the corruption in the royal family and defended it. He said, this is actually a good thing because we're on top. We're supposed to be corrupt. We're supposed to get what we want. This is our world, right? Like that was what he was saying. So I believe this is Donald Trump, and they are signing the Abraham Accords. So the Abraham Accords is this document that nations recognize Israeli sovereignty. And they highlight the common belief of Judaism and Islam through the prophet Abraham. So they point back to, hey, we have a common ancestor, Abraham, between these, all these nations, right? And these two different religions. But here's what I believe Trump is doing, whether he knows it or not. And he knows that he's appealing to their secular humanity, right? He's appealing to the greed aspect, the secular aspect, the human side, right? The demonic desires, like the things that have gone away from traditional Islam. Instead of appealing to them as religious folks, he's appealing to them as human beings who want to make more money, who want their name to be up in lights, who want to finish their building project like Solomon did, who are looking back to people. So he's going through Solomon to get back to Abraham, essentially.
Right.
And I think he recognized that their desire to be quote unquote good Muslims is dwarfed by their desire for riches, and he's taking advantage of that. Here's the problem though. Like Reese said, this could be really good for Israel, right? If we're friends with some of Israel's traditional enemies, then maybe if the United States is friends with them, then maybe that's going to set Israel up in the future to have there be more peace, because now we have a motivation to keep the peace, right?
Yeah.
Now we have some leverage to be able to keep the peace. But my question is, the main problem I'm looking at is, essentially we're setting up the United States as the good guy.
Yep.
And we're saying, hey, we're going to be friends with them, but here's my question, and this is the potential concern, is when does the United States go bad, if that makes sense? When does the United States fall to that same trap and say, hey, we're going to sorry, Israel, we want to make money. Sorry, Israel, we want a part of this, and then we are essentially swayed by the same thing that we're using to sway them at the moment. So those are my thoughts. Strange tangent. Sorry about that, but hopefully that makes sense.
I think that's fantastic. That is absolutely incredible analysis and connecting all that. I would say for your final question, that there's kind of an assumption there that hasn't happened already in the past inside the U.S. And, I think there's a case to make as far as what the secret behind the scenes people are doing, with other countries and nation creating and all that kind of stuff and controlling other people's and economies and that sort of thing. But this is incredible. I think it's very interesting take on it. I think that's I think that I'm impressed with what you've connected with all that.
The thing that stuck out to me about Solomon being a builder, and like Saudi Arabia, the leaders are not following the esoteric spiritual path of the idea of Solomon. We're talking about the Quran Solomon here, the Quran's version of the Solomon. They're not following the we're going to become more spiritual and less materialistic. No, they're following Solomon was wise and powerful, and he built, and then he subjugated demons to be like his slaves or his forces to help him build things or whatever. What stuck out to me about that is that they're following in that same footsteps for with AI. I mean, and we are here in the West as well, but it's that same idea. It's this might be a little bit controversial, but AI is going to be is already, and computers already, they're like the wealthy societies that built off of slaves, which was inhumane and terrible. But they're like, well, I have slaves do all my work for me. It was like, well, nowadays we built robot slaves, and that's the idea. We're gonna have all these slaves do our work for us, and it's kind of interesting because they want to invest more in AI. And so I was just drawing some connections there
as an interesting distinction between the flesh and the spirit, and kind of taking that as a big metaphor for large people groups and putting it in religion. And I think that is fascinating that you connected it basically all the way back to Cain, because Cain was the original builder, and thinking about the difference between Cain and Abel, and what Cain's preference was for the flesh, and then Abel's preference was for the spirit, right? There's all kinds of stuff to unpack with that. And it's just the worldwide problem that we have had this whole time, and that we're probably going to have until the return of Jesus, truly, because this isn't going to be resolved truly at the core of it until that happens. But I think that is a fascinating connection that you made, and I love that you pointed out the supposed Star of David, and I say that because I don't think it really actually has anything to do with David personally, but it's used in so many ways. And it's interesting that the asceticism and the mystical aspects of all of the worldviews or the philosophies are being kind of demonized and put down in order for material gain. And that is exactly what we're seeing. And this ties all right back into the Neom and the tower. This is the Tower of Babel all over again. It's trying to reach godhood in some way instead of just recognizing the sovereign God and allowing him to pour into the lives of the people with his wealth. Instead of going into God's kingdom, we're still just creating our own kingdoms. And that's just what we're seeing. And so I don't know how, to answer your question about, will America end up being something different? Well, I think America is going to just go down the same path as all the rest of these countries, if we're not already, with the flesh being propped up and the godhood being the desirable end point. The end game is that we are all gods. That's what they're looking for, without a sovereign God over us. And there's no direct, simple, concise, will the US go bad, or will we stay good, or whatever. It's just, you're going to have to dig a lot. And I don't think it's going to be easy to see whenever it does manifest, just as it isn't easy to see right now.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think some of that evil stuff's already behind the scenes, like I mentioned, happening kind of under the surface. But I will come back. I would say it comes back to a well-informed electorate. We are in a representative republic, and are we going to be informed and elect leaders that are going to represent our interests, or are we going to keep electing leaders that are going to sell us out? And so that kind of, to me, goes back to that. And leaders that will actually expose the corruption, uproot it, and those sorts of things. So for me, that kind of depends on what are we going to do as the people of America.
And I think that's going to happen for a time. We are going to get peace. We're going to achieve that peace. And just like the Bible says, like they'll be saying peace, peace, but what happens after that? We are heading into that direction. I think that what Trump is doing over there is helping facilitate peace amongst everyone. And I don't know like how far we're going to get to like China. I don't know like when that's going to be on the table, but like it's interesting to see all this world unification coming, and it's going to look really, really good.
Well, in some ways, obviously, there's other nations that have been very enraged with what Trump is doing. And, we had that discussion last week with Canada. Yeah, interesting thoughts. One thing that I noticed when I was researching Solomon was like in the Quran, it says that his success was largely a result of his reliance upon God and his willingness to stay close to God. And so that's one of the things we see. The difference there is like a lot of the Islamic leaders throughout history, the historians have said a lot of them look back to, the ones that dominated, they look back to Solomon as this major player and somebody that inspired them. But I think a lot of times it's not so much the ones that moved away from the religious aspect and more to the materialistic aspect. They're not looking at him as his devotion to God was inspiring, but rather his success was inspiring. So that's the difference. Is like instead of, I believe as a Christian that Islam, like to be saved, you have to come out of Islam, to truly be devoted to God, to the real God. It's just interesting that Trump is able to play off of the materialism of the Middle East, and especially of the leaders there, who in a lot of ways, like Ryan said, are using Islam as a tool, to get what they want and to control the people.